Welcome everyone, this is Danny and Karl with Get Wisdom. Today we're going to continue with our channeling series, and Karl's going to channel Danny Casolaro, who was a investigative journalist back in the 80s and 90s, and he had a very unfortunate and mysterious death, which was ruled a suicide in Martinsburg, West Virginia. I think it was 1991. And so he was investigating a scandal involving the U.S. Justice Department, and it's called an investigation into the Octopus and PROMIS software scandal. And my source was a book by Cheri Seymour called The Last Circle. So, and this still to this day is kind of a lot of journalists, or not a lot, quite a few journalists are still kind of looking into this because they call it the octopus because it has so many tentacles going into all these different areas. So we'll talk a little bit more about that before we start the channeling. But that's our subject for today. So thanks for joining us, and thank you, Karl. And Karl and I will have a little discussion about this, and then we'll start the channeling.
All right. Well, thank you, Danny. Thanks to all of you watching this. This is part of our exploration into all things useful to know in order to help humanity survive and advance. And I say that very pointedly, that we have some powerful headwinds working against human survival right now. So anything we can learn about the darkness and how it works is a way of perhaps opening up a discussion a little bit to help make our case more believable to folks when we come forward with a vast talk of human annihilation and risk to human survival and so on. You know, people's eyes glaze over and think, "Oh my God, I got to get out of here. These people are nuts." And I fully understand that reaction. But I also know there's a program of manipulation to make people run away from things of that sort, to believe automatically, because they're programmed with beliefs of that sort. Someone who talks about things like that has got to be misleading you. They're a danger, they're a deception, or they're idiots, and you're going to have egg on your face if you listen to them, and it's going to rub off on you, and you're going to look like a fool, and, just dump it, get out of there. And this governs what happens, because people can't bring themselves to adopt any kind of unconventional view. So this is what we're working against.
Yeah.
And we can go and probe the dark corners all we want to and bring forth evidence of a sort in that it won't necessarily be actionable, forensic, hard evidence, but it will be insights and a validation about what is causing this to happen. And that is a more powerful outcome, really, because these things are not small and isolated like we think.
Right.
When people do something out of character or that breaks the law or undermines society in some way, there's more of a story than maybe they're aligned with the wrong people. There's a deeper, bigger picture here.
Yeah. And I think that's indicative of this story in particular, because I think he initially got into this just with the fact that there was irrefutable evidence that the U.S. Justice Department was doing something criminal. This is at the federal level. This is when Edwin Meese was Attorney General, and one of his guys went after Inslaw, which is the company that made PROMIS software. And PROMIS software is a multi-platform data management software. I'll read this little caption here on the back of Cheri Seymour's book to kind of set the stage. You will have seen a little scrolling bio before this started, but if you're just listening, you won't. All you hear is music at the beginning. So. The last circle is a story about a Washington, D.C. journalist, Danny Casolaro, who investigated the theft of a revolutionary new software program that was the forerunner of artificial intelligence. It was called PROMIS, or Prosecutors Management Information System, and was developed for the U.S. Department of Justice to upgrade their case management tracking system. Danny worked closely with Bill Hamilton, the owner of Inslaw Company and the developer of the PROMIS software, to locate and identify those responsible for modifying the software, installing a backdoor in the program, and then selling it worldwide. These shadowy activities allowed U.S. authorities and personnel to secretly monitor foreign intelligence operations and track overseas commercial transactions. Danny soon learned more than he bargained for. The investigation led him into a labyrinth comprised of international spies, government officials, drug traffickers, mobsters, money launderers, and unsolved murders dating back as far as 1981. He called this cabal the Octopus. In early August 1991, Danny filled his briefcase with documents and traveled to Martinsburg, Virginia to bring back the head of the Octopus, according to his closest friends, who have said he was ecstatic about something he had recently uncovered. Danny never came home. He was found dead at a Martinsburg hotel on August 10, 1991. The local coroner ruled his death a suicide, and his body was embalmed even before his family was notified of his death. His documents and briefcase were missing and never recovered. 3 months after Danny's death, reporter Cheri Seymour began her journey down the investigative trail Danny left behind. One of the most provocative outcomes of this 18-year investigation was the discovery that 5 days before his death, Danny had uncovered a connection between former Director of International Affairs at the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and the Cali drug cartel in Colombia. Seymour provided that information to authorities in 1993. They followed up on that lead, and in 1995, the former director was indicted for money laundering, drug conspiracy, and racketeering. News of the indictment was published on the front page of the Washington Post. But the true story behind the case was never told, until now. A detailed look into the recent high-profile arrest and release of Mafia hitman is also included, along with other tales of intrigue and corruption about Danny's Casolaro's Octopus. So Cheri Seymour, as far as I know, is still alive, having read this book, written this book. I think it came out initially in 1994, and then I think it was either reprinted or updated in 2010. And as far as I know, she's still alive. And I don't know if she gives interviews or not anymore. A lot of these people, including Bill Hamilton, are pretty quiet about all of this, even to this day. So this is one of my resources. The other one was a series of articles written by a guy named Joseph L. Flatley, who also wrote an interesting book that I have not read yet. It's called The New Age Grifter, and this is apparently a true story. And it's kind of like a cult story, I think, with a New Age theme. And so anyway, that's our subject for today. And so, Karl, we're talking about like the similarities and differences for this as a channeling subject to some of the other characters. I kind of put them in the same wheelhouse as like, what was his name? He was the ex-FBI, this guy right here, Ted Gunderson. He was another. This is Ted here. You can see Ted Gunderson with Reagan, and so he was one of our channeling subjects. So Danny's kind of in that same arena, players, people who knew stuff that they probably shouldn't know, and it was dangerous for them to know, dangerous for them to talk about. So we don't know if he actually fits in that well in that group or not.
Yes, well, I'm already getting quite uncomfortable about the whole business here.
Sorry.
To be perfectly frank with you. I know you like going out and scouring around what's under the garbage cans and seeing all that.
Yeah.
And I don't so much. I mean, I appreciate the big picture, don't get me wrong, but the unsavory workings and details are, they're very sad and so
well, I think the point here is to trace it back to what the causal factors are. We don't need to know all the details.
Exactly. And
Source Creator helps these light beings temper their answers so that keeps us out of trouble. So, I'm going to answer some pointed questions here. I got 6 of them. And likely that we're not going to get very detailed answers about it, but we're going to get a very good overview about causal factors and why you and I and all of this work that you've done with this channeling comes back to the solution to this is prayer and partnership with God. Well, why would that be the case? Well, it would be the case given everything else that we've learned about the precarious position of humans right now. The plan is we're going to be annihilated, and that plan is very much or the genesis or the causal factors that are related to that plan are very much in play, we think, with a scenario like what we're talking about with Danny.
Yeah, and this is the thing. The bottom line for me and for Get Wisdom is saving the perpetrators really is a first order of business, because they're the core of the problem we have right now, the most immediate problem, where evil is working its way through institutions and undermining them and crippling them, limiting them, and ultimately destroying them. If we don't take action, it's hopeless. There's nothing we can do, and we'll never recover from that. So my goal is not to go and take names and try to get people locked up and expose and ruin these lives and careers, get them fired.
Right.
That's all beside the point.
Yeah.
They need help. They're caught up in something that's bigger than they are, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
They're part of this evil, and they're going to go down one way or another, karmically, if no other thing befalls them to limit their life and its happiness. They're going to pay a price over multiple lifetimes being a part of the corruption that's taken hold of the world to pave the way for these interlopers to get their ultimate agenda implemented here.
Yeah.
And when they darken our institutions, government, law enforcement, intelligence work, the military. We're all victimized, and they're victims first in just being caught in that mindset,
right,
in the grip of evil, and then acting in an evil way. And that's what I would like to see come out in this exchange, a little better explanation of how that comes about and why, because there's a bigger story always when these things pop up.
Yeah.
You know, there's some clandestine thing that goes wrong and it ends up hurting more than helping, and it makes a splash for a time, and it becomes almost like expected, you know, that there's going to be these things, folly after folly. And of course, many of them are successful, and we never hear about them because they do their work and people have moved on and it never comes to light. But the question really is this how the world should be run? And is this where we should be putting tax dollars to work doing, trying to control and manipulate and take advantage of others and promote a kind of sub rosa warfare that supports a criminal enterprise, maybe in addition to targeted killings and malfeasance, where money is drawn and siphoned out of government programs for clandestine work, and then you're supporting a large group of people doing kind of rogue law enforcement or paramilitary work that the taxpayer doesn't really want or can't even envision any use out of it, and it can worsen, and that's the danger, because it can misdirect an entire nation into doing evil.
Yeah. So
and
again,
it's never a good thing, because we'll pay.
And we're going back to the causal issues, and we get that in full measure with the answers to these questions. You know, the causal factors. Well, who's running these people who are going to pay this heavy karmic price? You know, those are the perpetrators that need the healing work, and they're not human. And so that's kind of the walking orders for Get Wisdom, is to, help our fellow humans understand the situation we're in, why we're in it, and what to do about it.
Right.
And so this is just one of the stepping stones that maybe gives us an ability, or some people's ability, to see something like this and be able to connect the dots for themselves. And our credibility could be established by virtue of the question, the way that the questions are answered and the information that's conveyed. We're likely not to get any names or any guilty parties or any details about many of the people who were involved that didn't survive, and some of the ones that are still around, even though I've crafted the questions to somewhat avoid that, so we're not just pinning ourselves in a corner every time we ask a question. It's open-ended enough so that we could serve that agenda, which comes through repeatedly. So with that, we got 6 questions, and maybe we should go ahead and get started.
All right, I will do my thing in reaching out to the creator of all that is to set up the interconnection of my consciousness with the consciousness of Danny Casolaro in the light, so he can speak through me, and to put safety around the work to avoid interference from outside this little gathering here. And we'll see what happens. And I just want to mention that channelers, for the most part, can't be trusted because they are not working through the divine realm. They're doing it on their own power, their own psychic abilities, and they don't think about safety by and large because they're comfortable already dealing with some being they believe is a lofty one, because they started out wanting that, and the phenomenon started happening. They were getting a response and a reply, and they never questioned it, because why should they? If they're reaching out to an archangel or some ascended master,
Yeah, it's like going to the grocery store. You don't expect to see an armed robber behind the cash register.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And let alone when you go up to heaven or you go to, the higher realms, if you want to leave it more generic in description. But I can assure you that there are many opportunistic beings who understand us perfectly and our ability to reach out intuitively, and they watch for that, and they swoop in and do a handshake with people who do that, even if they're just meditating. And it's to nip it in the bud and to get them corralled and corrupted so they are getting a false message, mostly an incomplete one. They'll get warmed over spiritual teachings that all sound good and make them very happy because they think they're getting all this lofty information. But there's little genuine problem solving meat on the bone. It's all generalities and sweetness and light and much of the same. And it can be very elegant and sophisticated. But these beings we're talking about are extraterrestrial, and they have more intelligence than we do. And they are psychic themselves. They have the wherewithal to go into our minds below conscious awareness and program us with all kinds of false beliefs. So we're up against a huge force here. So I don't mean to blame anyone. That's not the point of this. It's to be open about what is truly happening. That's always our quest. Show us more about the truth and help us be pointed towards answers and solutions to make things better. Because if we don't take action, not only will things worsen, but it will be on our shoulders nonetheless, even if we've never heard this message before. We came here to work on this. I promise you, everyone who's alive today knew about this problem before they came into life. And then they were born with a blank slate in their mind. And if they've not been taught there's something deeper and darker going on, the agenda is working to keep people in the dark. So who's going to blow the whistle? You have to know there's a problem in order for that to happen.
Okay.
See, we have an intruder already here that just popped up. I saw. Did you see that? You had your little bird friend on the screen for a moment. I don't know if that's going to be in the video.
Oh, I don't know. That's weird. No, I don't think it will.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
We were looking at bird pictures before we started here, so that apropos of nothing. I just thought it was funny. So, all right. So I will reach out and make the connection, and you will hear from him when he is on board, and then you can fire away.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Danny Casolaro speaking.
Thank you for joining us. Can you describe the circumstances of your death on August 10th, 1991 in Martinsburg, West Virginia, and if this was a murder, why were you murdered? Were you able to transition to the light successfully?
This, of course, is the most important subject in the ending of my life as my human form was concerned. But it is of no concern to me because I did what I came to do and I left a mark and am now back home safely with the beloved creator of all that is. And there is nothing better one can experience than to be in the presence of Creator energetically and know this with every part of one's being. It is a vastness and a purity of love beyond your imaginings. The world I left is near the opposite in many respects, and going further from that standard. And this is why I was in the life I lived. I was casting about for many years to find a role to play, and ultimately found it in exploring truths about dark doings. And this led to my death that was untimely. I had more to do. In fact, was reaching a pinnacle of research to expose some major unpleasantness that was a kind of indictment of the intelligence community and its perspectives and the workings involving the United States and other nations and the global contest always underway, jockeying for power and position of dominance, and usually serving the self at the expense of others. This is a world that is upside down, when the idea of uplifting one's own nation is achieved through the lowering of other nations and not an elevation to make one's country shine, to make it a renewed and even greater standard of excellence. I was involved researching a dark underside in a network that is essentially a cabal of vested interests, not only working against one another, but very much devoted to the task with a great deal of passion, personal excitement, and a sense of achievement through the holding of power, which indeed can be seductive. But we see little true power in the ability to manipulate a mere human being in a way to create a staged scene of suicide to cover their tracks in carrying out what was essentially a clandestine assassination of a researcher who had uncovered dark truths and wanted to blow the whistle. This puts the lie to the framing of so many episodes involving investigators wanting truth because they are responding to an inner drive to advance the cause of the divine, and saying they are simply conspiracy theorists and sensationalistic seekers of the spotlight, wanting self-aggrandizement and to be lauded, drawing attention to themselves, and laying claim to attributes and achievements that are simply phony, being self-serving and inaccurate, when the opposite is the case. By and large, conspiracy theories are either correct in toto or correct in part, or reflecting the fact you live in a world where so much of the darkness it contains and promotes reads like a science fiction novel. And inevitably, someone probing into those realities will be judged a conspiracy theorist, because the mainstream studiously avoids seeking deep truth about anything. They know better than to do that, because they are routinely managed and warned away from sacred subjects. when someone comes along who is a genuine gadfly, who cannot be constrained or dissuaded indirectly, there might be a heavier sanction placed against them with direct threats. And if that does not work, they can simply be eliminated. This is child's play for the extraterrestrial alliance that underlies everything wrong with the world, directly or indirectly. Much of it gained through an alliance with dark spirits who possess most human beings and darken their world and soften them up with corruption to make them more manipulatable, more complacent, and more vulnerable to what the politicians decree needs to happen or not happen. And the public will simply acquiesce either way and not be concerned or mount any kind of protest. The irony is that the most vocal of protests are engineered to happen to give you the illusion you are living a free existence in a free society, when the opposite is the case. If you try doing what I did, you might well end up hanged in your garage or having committed an act of suicide, driving your car headed directly into a large tree, or some other mishap, taking an overdose of heavy drugs, and so on. You have not progressed greatly in understanding what you are faced with in the elegance and sophistication that your opponents can bring to bear and stage manage almost anything to have a false appearance of individual circumstances, as with my becoming dissatisfied with my life and perhaps in the depth of despair taking a rash act against my own life. This is easy to arrange, including leaving a suicide note. It is the height of naivete to assume that that is meaningful evidence of suicide unfailingly. There is nothing that should be taken for granted when someone dies, particularly when there are known connections to this netherworld of evil, where there is a high stakes contest going on. Politics has been likened to playing hardball. What you are talking about in the underworld of intelligence, spycraft, and clandestine workings of the dark forces constitutes a perversion of institutions that is very much a state of warfare. To stage a suicide is a minor matter and readily done. my death was not through my own hands, other than I put myself at risk with my professional activities and didn't heed the warnings that were given to me. And I relayed the concern to others as well, but did not listen to my own inner instinct for survival, warning me to back away. And the end result was my demise. My hope is that that actuality can serve not as a warning and a dissuading example of the danger and cost seeking the truth, but as an object lesson that not only one must be careful, but one must root out evil so such things can no longer happen. You would not propose giving up your life simply because evil finds its way to your community in some disastrous event, even causing death or mass death. That is the wrong takeaway message. If you give in to complacency and assume a prosaic explanation is correct, you will miss the point of the context in which this happened, given my history. The complacency engineered in society covers up such crimes quite handily, because the media immediately will accept a pronouncement by the powers that be, the coroner's report, and so on, and assume the case is closed. There's nothing to see, and we'll move on. We are saying, for the record, there is much to see, not in evidence yet, from what I did with my life and attempted to bring forward. I was attacked even after my physical death was brought about. This was seen to. It is a form of vengeance that is routine with the workings of evil done by these interlopers. The dark spirit realm will descend in earnest, and its customary viciousness to commandeer a spirit emerging from the body and prevent further progress to return home to the light. I was rescued from that dark fate as part of the workings of Get Wisdom to provide spirit rescue work, specifically because these things happen to many, many people, sometimes entirely independently and at their own hands because of lack of preparation to move on and return home to the light in between incarnations. Those who are not spiritual and believers in the divine have severed a lifeline. That does not mean the light callers will not come for you when you pass away, but it means you will be less likely to see them so you can cooperate and journey home under their escort. You may well end up in limbo and will be there indefinitely until someone can speak for you and arrange your salvation. Those doing this work are exalted and do it because they have compassion for all who suffer. This is what you who are watching this video could be doing with your life if you were motivated to help the cause of the divine. So we want to promote this work because we have seen firsthand the great value it represents in saving people from a kind of suffering and torment you would not wish on your worst enemy. You have never experienced being encased in depravity as a raw energy, inundating your entire awareness. There is nothing more horrible than to go through that. And it is a travesty that it is so little known and appreciated in being the end result for a third of humanity as a routine, being unprepared to return to heaven. We hope this message reaches many, many people and want to honor those doing the work. It is a good beginning because there are many who are essentially in a kind of prison still, stuck between planes of existence and suffering grievously, but unable to save themselves.
Okay, thank you. Robert Booth Nichols, allegedly dead now, became a high-level source for your research and apparently warned you off the Octopus investigation shortly before your death. What can you tell us about him and the information he provided?